I am Dawn Marie Holder, Career Counselor in the Office of Student Services at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. I'll be your moderator this afternoon, and I'm joined by Dr. Jariel Joseph, CariScholar founder, and fellow mentors, Mr. Vera Morion, Ms. Marita Marshall, Mr. Sean Hercules, who will be joining us a little later, Ms. Jamisa Prince, and Dr. Delano D'Souza, and they're here to discuss with us how emerging researchers or practitioners can use mentorship as a developmental tool on your career journey. Here in the Office of Student Services, we see mentorship as a valuable tool that connects students, alumni, and community partners. It assists students to test their career readiness plan and build intentional partnerships to successfully do so. Since March 2020, the way we do and think about business and careers has changed. The access to and execution of academic study, internships, work, and volunteer services is very different. So how does a student or soon-to-be graduate navigate these waters? How do they develop and maximize relationships that can help them to answer current career or academic questions? So we hope today's discussion will offer some guidance. And we begin with an overview of the CariScholar Mentoring Program. We learn about our panelists and their own academic or professional journey. And then we will round off today's session with a Q&A segment. All right, so have your questions ready. You can place your questions in the Q&A box. So at this time, we will hear from Dr. Jariel Joseph, our founder, and she will tell us about herself and why she started the CariScholar Mentoring Program. So Jariel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holder. Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me? Yes, thank you for this brilliant introduction, and thank you to the mentors for being with us this afternoon and all of the participants. So it wasn't too long ago that I was a master's student at UWI Cave Hill, and my research supervisor, Professor Sean McDowell, encouraged me to apply to do a PhD at Cambridge. At that point, I had considered doing PhD research. However, the entire application process seemed quite daunting to me. Luckily, Professor McDowell had completed a PhD at Cambridge years prior, and he promised to assist me in the application process. Under his mentorship and guidance, I was ultimately able to secure a full scholarship to Cambridge, an experience that really changed my life. Today, I can recount several other instances in my life where I felt completely lost and unsure of myself. And it was that one piece of advice from a mentor that really helped to steer me in the right direction. This is why I profoundly believe in the impact of mentorship and the important role that it can play in one's life. And this is precisely why we launched CariScholar. So CariScholar is a Caribbean-based mentoring initiative, and our main goals are to connect Caribbean students or aspiring Caribbean scholars, as we like to call them, to professionals and academics in their field of study. And it's our hope that by making these kind of connections, we can help facilitate academic and career-related dialogue among mentees and their mentors. So students and persons who are interested in obtaining mentorship through CariScholar, what they would do is that the first thing you would do is you would go to our website, carischolar.com, and you can click on the Find a Mentor tab. And there you will have a form that you will fill in your information, and the form will allow you to also upload a personal statement where you will describe your unique situation and why you want to mentor. How can CariScholar be instrumental in your life? Once you have completed the application, the next stage CariScholar would identify a suitable mentor for you, and we will then introduce you to your mentor via email. You will also be provided with a handbook that lays out the entire mentoring process and also provides some important guidelines on how we expect the mentor-mentee relationship to proceed. After you have been introduced to your mentor, you and your mentor can do private introductions with each other, and we encourage you to make a schedule as to how often you plan to speak to your mentor, and also to set out goals that you wish to accomplish through throughout the mentoring process. And at the end of the initiation process, CariScholar would contact both you and your mentor independently to find out whether the mentoring is running smoothly at that stage. And then you have 5 more months of active mentoring where you can continue dialogue with your mentor, get to know your mentor a little bit better, get to see what are the different expertise and skills that your mentor have and how you can capitalize on those in helping you to navigate your own career and academic related path. And then your mentor might make recommendations to you, and it is your responsibility to give feedback as well as reevaluate the goals that you want to accomplish throughout the mentoring process. And at the end of that 6-month period, then both you and your mentor will independently assess the effectiveness of the program, which will help us to figure out what are the different kinks in the program that we need to iron out, and what are the different things that we can do going forward to make the program more effective. So this is just a brief overview as to how the mentoring works within CariScholar. And if you are interested in mentorship, then we encourage you to connect with us today. Now, today is not just only about learning about CariScholar, but it's also about getting exposure to the unique journeys of different CariScholar mentors. And I'm so proud that all of the people here today are all UWI Cave Hill alumni, and they will each give you a summary as to what their unique paths has been, as Ms. Holder has indicated earlier. So I will start with introducing Mr. Morlow. Well, he will introduce himself, but I would say that when I did my little spiel at the beginning, I mentioned that I could tell you a lot of stories as to how many times mentors were very instrumental in my life. And a nice little short story is that Mr. Morlow was actually the person who encouraged me to apply to UWI Cave Hill in the first place. So it's a really nice full circle moment to have him here with us today. So Mr. Morlow, the floor is yours. I think your mic is muted. Just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again, Gerald. And it's a pleasure to be here. Let me just, I don't know how much time you want to give me starting here, because you know I always have quite maybe too much to say often. But Gerald, and the rest of the panelists, I was very impressed with the CariScholar initiative, because I too saw the gap. And first off, let me say that the most defining period of my whole life has been the time I spent at Cave Hill, both as a student and as an employee after. I mean, it gave me a way to craft a new definition of myself as a Caribbean person with, you know, a rich African heritage. And that experience opened up a lot of possibilities for me. What I may, and you can stop me at any point, but I am not sure what I'm going to describe is the technical definition of a mentor. But in my journey, and let me just say, I did chemistry. Most people don't believe, but my undergraduate degree is chemistry. So those of you listening who feel I did this particular thing, so this is where I must be in life and so on, it's just part of a journey. The chemistry taught me problem solving. It gave me, it stretched my academic ability. It stretched my abilities in ways that maybe other subjects would not have. And I've moved on since into human resource development, learning and development, leadership and development. And I have never regretted having done chemistry. Now, there are 3 ways in which I find what we describe as mentors can influence, and they have influenced me. And as I said, this may not be the technical definition, but I found that there are people I observe and I learn from them. There are other people who create an environment where I can grow. And it's almost like it's only after I realized they were deliberately creating the environment so I could grow. And then there are those other people who actively mentored me. And Gerald, I don't know if you want me to go through these, just some examples, or if I need to yield to another.
Yes, you could keep going. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of people I observed, so I grew up in a very remote village in Dominica, where in those days, it's not remote now, but in those days, people almost used to call it like behind God's back. And so what made me feel like I could conquer the world? What made me feel I could go to Africa and Asia and Europe and be as good or better than any professional I met there? And you'd be surprised. Somebody who hadn't even gone to university, a gentleman called Gordon Henderson, who was from a neighboring community. I saw this man leading a band in the village, a group of guys, and I watched how he pulled these stars together and made them operate. And then during my teenage years, the gentleman got up, took these guys, went to Guadeloupe with them, and next thing I heard, he was in Paris doing interviews. He learned French fluently. Then he was on the African continent. Then he was in the Indian Ocean. And I said, wow, I can do that too. And one of his songs became like a mantra for life. So just watching him do that made me realize, wow, I can do it. And here I am. There was also Dennis Joseph, who also wasn't a university graduate, and I watched him in the band house, actually, working with stars. And I mean, that taught me so much. You know how he's not a musician himself, he's not playing the instruments, but he's getting these people to do, be the best, be their best selves. And of course, the next one in that category is Alwyn Bully, Dr. Alwyn Bully, who's one of our cultural icons in Dominica. I watched how he taught as a student at the Dominica Grammar School. I saw him teach and how he interacted with the students and how he brought into focus the importance of the arts. And that influenced me for the rest of my life, because that was what made me ensure that each of my daughters had exposure to the arts to enrich their lives. So what about the next group, the group that create the environment for me to grow? As a member of the JCs, there were some gentlemen again, and I keep emphasizing this because sometimes we believe that we have to classify who or how a mentor should be structured. It's not like that. It's a connection that you have to find that allows you to grow. So in the JCs, there are some gentlemen there, Gillette Regis, Anthony White, who are both deceased, and John Lewis. And they were not university graduates at that time, but they created an environment for me to grow. So let me explain what they would do and fundamental learnings. I held a position on the executive at some point. So these were seniors in the organization. I would come to a meeting ready to present, right? Make a presentation. They would chat with me. We would probably have drinks and chat and so on. Then I would go and do the presentation. And these same good gentlemen who were chatting so well with me just before the meeting, after my presentation, they would tear the presentation to pieces. I mean, they would have me almost in tears. And then after the presentation, after the meeting was over, they would say, let's go and have a drink. And you would be amazed how that taught me. It taught me not to be personal, that you can disagree with ideas and still be cool with each other as people. So that environment helped me. Then there was Anthony Lockhart, who was headmaster at the grammar school. When I joined his staff, I felt I had taught for a few years and I knew a few things about teaching, and voila, I ended up in the school where Anthony Lockhart decided that he would take away the discretionary powers from mere teachers to just dish out punishments. Well, you know, a lot of us younger teachers, we were grumbling. We had to go through so many steps before we could give a detention. We had to go through a year here. We had a whole system. And after I realized what he was trying to teach us is that we needed to earn the respect of the students. It's not about just dishing out punishment. We have to make our classes interesting. We have to earn their respect so they want to be part of what we have. And that was a big learning for me. The third one I would mention that created an environment where I could grow is Sir Cade White Venner, who was head of the central bank. And while I worked there, so what he did was he made sure, so one, he expressed great confidence in me. So when he brought me to introduce me to the people at World Bank and IMF, he did it as though, hey, listen, I have full confidence in this guy, and he just left me with them, and he just figured I would get it done. And I could swear he would stay up at night dreaming of impossible things for me to do. So he would like say to me in the morning, okay, I want to do this. And I know nobody has done it yet anywhere in the world, but I know you can do it. And just expressing that confidence and that trust and giving me the support to continue. You know, sending me to parts of Asia, sending me to different parts of Europe and Latin America, sending me to World Bank, to different institutions, Bank of England, so that I could gain that experience and having that kind of trust that, listen, you can do it and you're going to do it. I mean, just having one person having that trust in you makes you feel as though you can conquer the world. Of course, the last group are those who mentored me directly. So at the Dominica Electricity Services, I met a gentleman called Martin Richards, who's now deceased. And what he would do is just ask me questions. I was like, okay. And then, you know, and then I remember once we had an unfortunate incident where an employee died at work. And he said, I want you to come with me. So I'm going to deal with this. I don't want you to say anything, just observe. And when we are done, you can ask me all the questions you have and I'll try to answer. And I went and I was totally amazed at what he did. And there's no other way I could have learned that. There's no book that could have taught me what he taught me. I mean, I watched how he dealt calmly with the family, how he dealt with the different authorities, how he looked at the law and made sure that the organization was covered and all of that. And to this day, when I'm in organizations and people are amazed that I don't run around like a headless chicken when there's a disaster, that's where it came from. You know, somebody brought me along that journey. Then there's Dr. Aubrey Armstrong. So very often I do sessions, workshop sessions, and the participants at the end are usually, yeah, how good it was and all of that. And I'm just saying, no, it's not me, it's Dr. Aubrey Armstrong. So what he did, one, he introduced me to adult learning and andragogy. He taught me the methods, and then he came to observe me. And he never said, do this or do that. He just asked me at the end, why did you do that in that way? And I'd explain. And then he said, okay, is there any other way you could have done it? How could you have done that better? He just asked me questions, never tell me do this, do that. And you know, the greatest learning there, and one of the things is that the mentor-mentee relationship, the mentor has to change the relationship as the mentee changes. And I realized that by how my mentors did it. So he did that. Then it went to a next stage where he involved me in certain things so that I could learn more. And you know the graduation process, what it was? When he was selected in his capacity to do an assignment, and he just said to me, you know, I'm unable to do this. I would like you to go and do it. That was like, yes, you've arrived. And on 2 occasions, he had to do a memorial lecture. And when he first gave it to me, I said, but how is he giving me this thing? I mean, I don't have a PhD. He wants me to do this thing. But I went and I did it, and I did it to the best of my ability. Then when the new government in Belize was established in 2008, Commonwealth Secretariat asked him to go there with a team because in Belize, all the permanent secretaries have to move once the government changes. And when that government took office, only one person on that team had been in government before and wasn't even a minister. So the Commonwealth Secretary had put this team together. So Aubrey Armstrong was selected to go with Prime Minister Owen Arthur, deceased, and former CAPSEC from Canada, somebody. And then the gentleman says to me, you know, I am tied up this weekend, can you go and do this? Let me tell you. I mean, I had all sorts of quakes because I'm like, okay, this is an arena that I have not operated in. How does he think I can do this? And I went, and the the results were positive. So 2 more on this list. Dr. Bevis Peters at the University of the West Indies. When I worked there, through him, I was inspired to do my master's degree. Well, I wanted to do a master's degree, but the questions he asked, and you know, when you're a certain age, you feel you know all the answers and you can fix the world. And I'll go to Dr. Peters and I'd say, well, you know, this, that, that. And he just asked me, how you know that to be so? What evidence you have for that? I have not seen any evidence. What, you know, and just by those questions and challenging what I believed, allowing me to have that banter with him, I kind of grew and was able to move. The final one in this group is the Dr. Michael McQuart, who introduced me to action learning. And he again questions. He never tells me do this or do that. He just expects me to do my best, but then he asks me, well, why did you do that? How might you approach this in a different way? And by just those questions, I eventually got there. So the the thing with this, I think a mentee, you have to have a certain amount of humility, because you have to really kind of bow down and say, okay, yeah, you know, I'm willing to take from this individual, you know, and it doesn't matter that okay, sometimes the person may not have the paper qualification that you have, or they may not have the one you think they should have, but you have to discern that the journey you're on, this person can add some value, and, you know, be humble to that. You have to have the desire to learn. You have to have some wish to succeed, a commitment to understand yourself. You must want to be able to understand yourself, because as you go through the relationship, you will grow. Now, as a mentor now, you also have to have humility and a healthy ego. One of the things I had to learn is that you know, some of the people who claim that I mentored them, they didn't just do anything I said. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think I gave this wonderful advice, and then they'll do exactly the opposite or something else. And initially, my ego was a little bruised, and then I realized, no, this is their story. My contribution was to help them see another perspective and probably strengthen their resolve to do it the way they had thought of. It helped them to see what loopholes they had and to fix them. So I have to be able to let go and say, okay, yeah, it's not they haven't given me the whole story. I don't know all the feelings, and so they've shared a part with me. I've given them the benefit of my experience. Then it's up to them to move, and I have to be okay with that. I have to also trust the capacity and intention of the mentee to perform well. And I have to sometimes model the way. So I have to sometimes show, this is, you know, would you like to see how I do this? Yeah, okay, here's how. You know, send them resources and say, okay, you might. Don't tell them they must read it, but say, hey, listen, maybe this is somewhere you would want to look at. One of the things that Aubrey did for me too was that he insisted that while I was doing my academic qualifications, to ensure I joined professional organizations and also get the professional certification. So as a result, so I have the top certification on the UK side in terms of the fellow of the of CIPD, and I have the top on the west side, which is the GPHR. And the thing is, I was able to do the things concurrently, gain the experience, and then get the kind of authentication, you know, of the the thing. Okay, yes, thank you. So this is basically the end. The questions, the mentor must have the questions that inspire and cause reflection. You must be a cheerleader to support and be enthusiastic. And of course, your role changes as the person develops, and there must be mutual trust on both sides. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morla, for dropping so many gems for us. I know that there are so many different tidbits that people can pull from what you said. We'll move right along to Ms. Marshall, who will tell us about herself and about her journey to becoming a physiotherapist. I think you're amazing.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Happy to share. Yes, my name is Marita Marshall. I'm a sports physiotherapist, and I actually started my journey at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, where I would have done a year in sciences, and then I would have transferred over to the University of the West Indies Mona campus, and I started my pursuit of becoming a physical therapist. I completed my bachelor's degree there in the 3 years, and then I moved back to Barbados, where I would have worked in a private physiotherapy clinic for just about 2 years. And then I went on to do my master's in sports medicine in Scotland, in Dundee, Scotland. So it has been a journey. It has not been a straightforward path. Initially, I was, a bit uncertain of what I really wanted to do. And I kind of definitely made up my mind during my first year at Cave Hill. Jarrell that's where we met, and she was so into science, and I knew straight off, okay, this is not me. I can't do this. I knew I always wanted to help people. I always wanted to work in the medical profession. And once I made that decision to pursue physiotherapy and to get that first degree, I think, I was set on it and I went straight for that. So just saying all that to say that most times the process can be a little frustrating, can feel daunting, can feel lost. But, at some point in time, with the right guidance and mentorship, you can find your way, and it makes the process a little bit easier. And for me, I think some of the challenges that I would have faced, especially when deciding where and when to do my master's, I would say I didn't really have as much guidance as I would have liked. And that's one of the things that really pushed me into becoming a mentor, because I see it as something that, young people out there need and would appreciate. It's something that I would have appreciated in my time and through my professional journey. So I am just really grateful to have the opportunity to share my experiences, share some of the challenges that I would have faced, and just help others really, find themselves and find the right path that they want to pursue. I think that's all I'm supposed to say for now.
Yes, thank you so much. I really like the fact that Mr. Murillo brought up the fact that he did chemistry and then he decided to go on and do all of these other amazing things. And those of you who listened to what he was saying, you would have seen that he had experience in many different fields until he ultimately became the executive director of Royal Caribbean. And now you are recounting the fact that you started off doing sciences and then you decided that you wanted to go into physiotherapy and helping others and so on. And I think young people have a lot of pressure on themselves to sort of like figure out everything. And I think that's a message that people need to like get from what both of you guys have said, is that you don't have to have it all figured out at 18 years old. It's okay for you to work through things and to move from one thing. It's okay to start something new and to move from one thing to another, as long as you sort of like make the most out of each experience. It is perfectly fine. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us, Ms. Marshall. And now I will move on to Mr. Hercules. I think he is here with us, joining us all the way from Canada.
Yes, thank you, Jarrell, Dr. Joseph, for inviting me. Okay, so where do I begin? So after CAPE, at CAPE I did biology, chemistry, and math. I was set to be a doctor. Like I was watching Grey's Anatomy and I was like, I want to be like Preston Burke, to be the cardiothoracic surgeon. Like I was ready. I didn't get accepted the first time I applied. So I started UWI as a biochemistry major. I was waitlisted. I don't even know what that means, but like they didn't tell me, like I was not accepted essentially. So I started in biochemistry, and that's where I met Jarrell. I went to secondary school with Marita, so we were both in that stream of, let's be doctors. But then we got pushed into sciences. And after my first few weeks of undergrad of biochemistry, I realized that I really love chemistry a lot more than biochemistry. Or I should say, my grades in biology were not as good as they were in chemistry. And I remember it was like, at least for chem, the first year, chem 1010, it was like me and Jarrell, like in the top. Like I was like, this girl Jarrell is always getting higher grades than me. I can't let this happen. But anyways, sorry, I'm going too much into detail here. But yes, I did my undergrad in biochemistry, and then I switched. Well, not switched. I added another major. So I then double majored in biochemistry and chemistry, which I would advise no one to do that. It's just a lot of work. So I did that, and still, within the hopes of going to medical school, I applied, because you can apply after your first year to get into med school. and they accepted me for veterinary medicine. And I was like, I don't love animals that much to be a vet doctor. So I just continued with my undergrad. And yeah, I continued with it because at this point I had felt, you know what, if I have a full undergrad degree, I can then do medicine afterwards if I really wanted to, but at least I have a full degree, right, before transitioning to medicine, and then realizing I don't like it and then have to, you know, do something else. So I pursued my undergrad, biochem, and within this point of my undergrad, in my second year, I think it was, I went to Haiti. So I went to Haiti on a relief trip. This was right after the earthquake. And while I was there, like my perception of life changed drastically. And I felt like being a physician, yes, that would be great, but I like a lot of like healthcare is not that accessible, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to be living in a career that would allow me to reach remote areas through healthcare, but I didn't exactly know what it would look like. I knew it was moving away from being a physician where you just see like, you know, 12 patients a day or whatever. I wanted to do more population type of work, especially in underdeveloped countries, or developing countries, is what I should say. So then I set out on like looking at other types of careers. But while I was doing my undergrad, I finished in 2012. I was also on the radio. So I was a radio broadcaster in Barbados, and I interviewed a couple just about something very random. And then after the discussion, they were like, "So what do you want to do with the rest of your life?" I was like, "That's a very daunting question, but you know, I really want to go into like, I really want to basically do public health, but I didn't know what the terminology was for it as yet." So then they led me to this degree, the Master of Public Health, to which I applied to at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus again. And usually, like that program doesn't really take, like they don't take science students really. It's usually for doctors, environmental health officers, nurses, you know, people that need to just do some extra training, you know, get a nice little salary raise. Like usually, like that's what people get the MPH for. But somehow they accepted me. I was the youngest person in the class. As I said, straight out of sciences, no real life experience, but they accepted me. I finished that, and I just gained so much knowledge from that degree that, you know, it really, you know, it solidified what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So after my MPH, I was then hired as a research assistant at the Chronic Disease Research Center, which is now called the George Allen CDRC. And I was working there as a research assistant, conducting systematic reviews on social determinants of health for various cancers, and respiratory diseases and mental health in the Caribbean specifically. So at this point, you know, I was, you know, still along the whole public health type of work, and but adding another layer of that into disparities. So disparities based off of socioeconomic status, etc. So all of that was very interesting, but it still felt as though something was missing. So though I loved public health, it didn't feel as though it fully uh, mentally challenged me or intellectually stimulated me to the point that sciences did, but then sciences was, it was just too intellectually stimulating. So, you know, at this point I'm hoping for something kind of in between. And that's when I applied for my PhD at McMaster University. So I very randomly met my now supervisor, Dr. Juliet Daniel, while I was at Cave Hill as a research assistant. And I started in her lab as a PhD student. And, you know, one of the main reasons why I fully, you know, signed on and said, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna go, is because yes, it's a biology lab, and I did not like biology, as I started off by saying, like it was not the subject that I got better grades in. But she did, you know, she did, well, while she was interviewing me, she did mention that we'll be working on this really cool project about breast cancer and the racial disparity in breast cancer, and potentially traveling to Nigeria, you know, to do this work. And I was like, okay, well, I 1,000% I'm going to sign on to this, because here we are with the public health and the sciences, a nice merge in between both of the fields. And yeah, and that's where I am right now. I'm finishing up the PhD, hopefully by April. And mentorship throughout this process has been critical but lacking, especially within my first few years. Like if I didn't randomly interview that couple about something completely unrelated, I probably wouldn't have known that much about the public health program, or that I really wanted to do it. Like I feel as though mentorship was clearly lacking, especially in those earlier years. Now I have Dr. Daniel. She's also from Barbados. She is a very distinguished professor here in Canada, worldwide really. And her mentorship has really meant a lot to me, like now as a scientist. So that's why, you know, when Jarrell started CariScholar, I was like 1,000%, we need to sign on to this and get as many students mentored, because yeah, it's definitely needed and lacking in sciences, I would say. But I would say though that there were some really great professors in my undergrad, like Dr. Gardner O'Neill, Dr. Williams, and can't remember her name now, in chemistry as well. But they were really, really, really great professors, and they definitely helped with the journey in undergrad. I don't know if I touched on things.
That is a nice, I really like the way that you put the timeline together of like all the things that you did that led you from one stage to the next. And I know you stress a lot about grades, but I really don't want people listening to get the impression that you need to have the best grades to succeed, right? You don't. And what I noticed, a lot of the people who go on to do really good, amazing, creative things are not necessarily the people who got the top grades in the class, because a lot of different things tap into different qualities that you have, like your creativity, your ability to think outside of the box. Sometimes the person getting the biggest, the highest grades, they think within the box and they can cram the textbook and they can come out with a high grade. But then when it comes to being super creative, they crumble. So I think what is more important is by having the right persons alongside you that can help guide you and can help tap into your own strengths. Okay, we will hear next from Miss Prince. So we heard a lot about from people with science background who had some experience with science, and now we're shifting gears to Miss Prince, who is a legal advisor, and we're gonna hear more from her.
Thanks, Jarrell, and thank you for doing this. I think this is such an important platform, and it's something we need to continue encouraging, and you should do more of this as much as you can. So my name is Jamisha Prince. I am a trained attorney at law. I'm currently not practicing, but I am a legal advisor as well as a diplomat. So I advise my permanent mission in New York on various matters of international law. My journey was not as complicated as the speakers who went before, because I think law is a very streamlined, straightforward track. However, I did have a lot of ups and downs, highs and lows. For me, it was a very trial and error type situation. And I essentially was faking it until I made it to where I thought I needed to be. From choosing the right courses at UWI, from deciding what legal aid clinic I needed to do at law school. It was just me, you know, like pressing buttons and hoping that something worked. And it's really for that reason why, you know, mentorship, when CariScholar was launched, it was something that I decided, yeah, I need to do this. Because the mentorship was lacking in my life, in my professional career. And it was almost as if I was lost in the wilderness in this vast field, and there was no one really to guide me. So when I got to the point where I found my footing and my bearings. Not that I've figured it all out, because I haven't. And I am now at a place where I think that my missteps, the lessons that I've learned, all of my trials, errors, highs and lows can help somebody else. I believe that I now have a responsibility to share that knowledge. So this is why mentorship became a part of my life, and it became so important to me. Because looking back on the journey that I've had, I realized that I have privilege. I have developed privilege over the years during my journey, and things won't get better for Caribbean students and Caribbean professionals until people with that privilege, and that privilege is knowledge, until we realize our privilege, we accept our privilege, and we start thinking critically about how our privilege could help somebody else, things aren't going to get better for us. So that's essentially, how I ended up here. I hope that was straightforward enough and it gave enough information. So that's it for me.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I really like the way you stress the fact that we do have privilege as people who have gone through the system, and many people might say that we are successful, we have succeeded, or we are on a path to success. And yes, it's just about paying it forward, right? How can you use the knowledge that you already have and the experience that you already have to help someone, to help guide someone, to pour into somebody else's life? And we will now round off our introductions, or I would not like to call these introductions anymore, because you guys gave like full-on speeches that can be like TED Talks, that so I think we calling it introductions is probably a mishap. So we will now move on to Dr. D'Souza, who will tell us more about himself and his journey.
Thank you, Gerald, and everybody else. Thanks for sharing, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me along on this journey of CariScholar as one of the earlier mentors. My journey, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit further than some of the other persons. I'm going to take it almost from, my childhood perspective, because growing up, one of the major challenges that we have, and I think one that still prevails even today, is financial challenges in homes. Now, obviously, I grew up in a single parent home. My mom had 4 kids. At one point in time, it was like literally all of us living in one bedroom, and Mr. Morillon spoke about how things teach you, and how, things that you don't expect. But from that, I kind of got the experience of learning how to get along with everybody. I had sisters, I had brothers, and within that small confine of a space, you kind of don't let certain things bother you. You kind of become more affectionate. It kind of teaches you, it kind of molds you. So those are some of the earlier challenges that I had. Also stemming from that was a sort of a lack of recognition of the importance of education. And you find that a lot, especially in the older households, and so my grandparents and so on are raising the kids. And so they don't have that appreciation for the value and the recognition of importance. So they don't push education as much in those households. And we had that problem a lot back in the older days, when we had situations where parents would go out and work and they would leave their kids with the grandparents. And so that was a preschool. You have to work, but you leave your kids at home with your grandmother, your aunt who not working, and so on. So that was it. And because of that, we invariably had a situation where education wasn't being pushed. And I was kind of a part of that kind of construct, where my grandmother, she took care of us a lot when we were young before we went to preschool, and she was a market vendor and so on. But they didn't have an appreciation for education. And there was also a kind of lack of positive role models and so on. Strange enough, my mom was one of the most important role models in my life. From as young as I was, my mom, I didn't think my mom, she didn't finish secondary school. I think she dropped out at school events. But for some reason, this lady who was a vendor, who had so many jobs, at one point in time, she was a cobbler, she used to be fixing shoes and so on. But this woman always had a book. She was always reading. And I, as a youngster, I couldn't understand, I was like, so that, just seeing that, knowing somebody who's not formally educated or anything, but they always had a book in their hand, in between a shoe, and she's fixing a shoe, she would be reading and so on, lunch hours. And that kind of, opened my eyes to that. Then kind of shift now to primary school. And one of the challenges that I felt, that I faced particularly, and I think it's still a debate that's raging on right now, in terms of the perceived inferiority of certain primary schools. Now, I would have gone to one of the primary schools, while it is in Central Kingston and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it was not one of those primary schools that are recognized for academic prowess. It was one of those one of those primary schools that you kind of just went because it's in your neighborhood. And, people weren't expecting much from that. So you had that sort of inferiority, that feeling when you're going. It's not a prep school. It's not one of the Catholic schools and so on. And persons typically don't go much further after that primary school. And that was one of the challenges that I had, in that primary school environment. I was fortunate to be mentored sort of by teachers who become mentors, and we have a lot of that, where you kind of come to meet them as a formal relationship as a teacher, but then gradually they become more. They start checking up on you on weekends. They start making sure that you're eating. They start making sure that you have the kind of environment at home. They try to make sure that you're not spending time on the block, that sort of thing. So we have that going on. Where I had a teacher, Mr. Butcher. I think he's actually still at that primary school now. One of those guys who kind of came up from Parslot and so on, those areas. And listen, this man was a serious fella. I mean, this man, that was when corporal punishment was more acceptable and so on. You had to learn and you had to know your stuff. And because of him and other teachers in that institution, I was able to place within the top, I think it was the top 20 or the top 30 in common entrance, which is kind of like my next phase. And in primary school, you had the inferiority. And within the concept of common entrance and grammar school and the community college, for me, it was recognizing that you're as good as anybody else in the country. Because in the primary school, you were like, whew, you weren't sure that you would make it. But then when you go into grammar school, you pass from grammar school. And as anybody here, Jamisha, you will know grammar school and high school kind of mentors. And it still does, because my little nephew just got into grammar school, just started grammar school. And I was over the moon that he was following in that legacy. So we still have those secondary schools and so that you can associate with that. Although that conversation is ongoing about the elitism inside of these primary school and these secondary school constructs. But that kind of allowed me to recognize that you're as good as anybody else in the country. That was step one. Because you in primary school, you weren't sure if you were cut out to go beyond your little neighborhood. Then all of a sudden now, moving out of my little neighborhood and going into secondary school, which was in Kingston, which is in the main thing, you kind of recognize that you're competing with persons from all over the country now. Those who are more, who have different socioeconomic backgrounds and so on. Now you're in there with them. And you're competing with them, and it kind of makes you feel, well, listen, I'm as good as anybody else in the country. And that's what common entrance, grammar school, which is secondary school, and community college kind of did for me. It made me recognize that I could compete with anybody. Fast forward now to UWI. And what I kind of gained from UWI was a step above that. It was the recognition that I am as good as anybody else regionally and internationally. Because now you've been able to get out of St. Vincent in the sense that, that's not a bad place, but I mean, you're able to apply to UWI and get in. And strange enough, like Mr. Morelon, I think economics, which is what I now lecture at UWI, that was actually my worst grade for Cambridge and A-level. But I think my best grade was law, Jamisha. Jamisha and I were in class at community college, and law, everybody just assumed that I would be a lawyer. But ultimately, I came to Cave Hill and I did a double major in economics and management. While I was there in my undergrad, student leadership became something that was there to me because of a need. When I came into the university environment, there was a student leader by the name of Adwin Trenton, as we call him, Don Trent Jamisha. Jamisha and I also served on the Guild of Students together in the early years, who was a straight up guy. And he kind of, showed me what transformational leadership from a student perspective could do in terms of what you could do simply as being on the Guild, how you can transform lives of your fellow students on campus. And that meant a lot to me. He kind of guided me. There was another guy who's one of my best friends now, Akeem McKen. And very often we have the impression that your mentor has to be older than you or significantly older. Sometimes you can find somebody who's very close to you in terms of age and so on, but teaches you a lot in terms of mentorship. And those were two individuals like that for me. There was also Dr. Judy Whitehead, she wrote the book. Literally, the textbook that we use for microeconomics and still do today was written by Dr. Judy Whitehead at UWI Cave Hill. And she kind of, when you were having doubts about anything, you would go to her and she would help you out. And beyond that, strange enough, when I had applied to do my MPhil PhD She was the director of Celicis, which is the Arthur Lewis Institute there. And when I first applied, they couldn't, based on the topic that I was doing, because I was doing education and development in St. Vincent, pre-colonialism and so on, and they couldn't match me with a supervisor. And so, although I was offered a scholarship, the situation was quickly emerging where they were going to have to say, well, we can't match you with a supervisor, so we're going to have to pull the scholarship, or we're going to have to defer. And Dr. Judy White had called me personally, and she said, listen, I mean, we have a situation here where we can't match you with anybody, but I really want you to come to them. And she told me this. She said, come to Barbados, and we're gonna figure it out. and so I came to Barbados. I did not have a supervisor at the time, and she assigned me to Dr. Brian Francis, whom I'm sure many of you know. So she assigned me. She eventually persuaded Dr. Brian Francis to be my supervisor, and I came. But I said that to say, like, it was her. She recognized something in me from undergrad, and she said, listen, I want you to come over regardless of what's happening. I know that there's a lot happening and we can't match you, but I want you to come. In the end, Dr. Francis left the university, and I think he went to OECS, the OECS Commission, and I was reassigned then to Professor Troy Lord, who was another, well, then he was a Dr. Troy Lord. He was my supervisor all the way to the end. The mentorship he gave in terms of my research, in terms of what he did, in terms of the difficulties that I had. There many times I would go to him about something, and he would say, listen, this thing ain't as hard as you're making it seem, brother. Like, he would tell me that straight. It's not as hard as you're making it seem. And, at one point in time, he said, listen, he brought his physical copy of his thesis and he gave it to me. And he said, read this. I am ashamed of some of the things I've written in here. No. But at the time, I felt like this was gold, and then you move towards, they say, you kind of have to just move with it. And strange enough, as fate will have it, he's now the dean of my faculty. So he's now my boss, kind of. So he's now the dean of social sciences faculty. I'm in the Department of Economics. And we continue to go to, the mentorship relationship continues. It's just changed now. I'm no longer a student per se. I am now, a new academic at the campus, and he's lecturing me in that way. And Mr. Moran, you spoke about that in terms of the relationship changing and the adjustment in terms of mentorship. So now he's mentoring me to be a good lecturer. It's no longer about completing a degree. He's mentoring me to be a good lecturer. He's mentoring me to we're trying to write some papers together and to coordinate and so on. So we have that sort of relationship continuing. And that's kind of it. And just quickly in terms of the mentoring, for me, before I really get into full mentoring, I like to kind of emphasize on certain critical life principles to me. So any mentee that I take on, I always speak about the importance of honesty, integrity, those sort of moral things that matter to me in terms of giving your word, keeping it. Those are the things that matter. And then I kind of go into other things like openness. And as Mr. Moran mentioned, I try not to take things personally. But before I mentor, I speak to those important life principles. And then we kind of move to develop the relationship, because you and I are never going to get along as mentee-mentor if you're dishonest, if you don't have integrity, if you don't keep your word when you say you're going to do something. So I kind of make sure I put those things out there up front, and then we kind of go from there in terms of building the relationship. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I know I was long-winded, but I apologize.
Thank you very much, Dr. D'Souza. I like the fact that you share like a lot of the different challenges that you went through from a young age and to where you are right now. And I think that is important for those of our participants here to appreciate that it doesn't matter how humble your beginnings were, you can succeed and you can excel, and it is a matter of putting yourself in positions or aligning yourself with people who can help you and who can help push you forward. And I really appreciate your generosity in sharing those stories with us, and I know a lot of people will be inspired by you, because now you're a lecturer at UWI, which is like so awesome, which is like amazing. So now I will pass things over to Ms. Holder, who will lead the Q&A segment. So Ms. Holder, you can take over. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We've learned so much from our panelists today, and we have a few minutes more, but we are ready to hear your questions. You have a diverse group here. Some are they're from law, they're from business. We have scientists, which I think is so very important. And we are here to take your questions. So the first question we have, is CariScholar predominantly aimed at undergraduates? What about those who are currently doing a master's degree and still feel the need for guidance?
That is a good question. I think I will take that one. And the answer is no, it's not predominantly aimed at undergraduates. At CariScholar, we match each mentee to their mentor on a case-by-case basis. So I mentioned earlier on that you have to provide a personal statement when you apply for a mentor. So based on the things that you mentioned to us in the personal statement, and there is a guide on the website as to what you are to include in your personal statement. Based on those things that you tell us, then we can identify a mentor that is suitable for you. So say, for example, you're a master's student, and let's say you're studying in physiotherapy, and then you say that you want somebody to assist you because you kind of feel lost, then Ms. Marshall would be an excellent mentor for you because she has already gone through that program and she understands how it works and the ins and outs. She has her own business, that her own clinic that she runs, and so that person would be a good mentor for you based on that stage that you are. So we evaluate, in the short answer is that we evaluate each mentee application on a case-by-case basis, and based on the different types of mentors that we have in our database, we will match you to the one that is most suitable. Also, there may be cases where we do not currently have a mentor that is a perfect match for you, then we will do our own personal search to find a mentor that would be able to fill in that need for you. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Okay, yes, and our questions are coming. So someone, they have to leave very soon and they've learned a lot and they look forward to learning more and finding out about the scholarship. Sorry, about CariScholar. Now, another question, what would you say are some of the difficulties in terms of effective mentorship in the Caribbean?
I think any one of the mentors that want to take the lead and answer this, they can unmute themselves and.
Yes.
I'll jump in if no one else wants to. I think there are two main challenges, Caribbean specific challenges that is.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is that although our region may be around, I think, 18 to 20 million people, there is a saturation of professions, which leads to young professionals and young students being viewed as competition rather than as potential mentees. So you would find that fields like medicine and law pretty saturated, not so much the sciences. But I experienced it myself where I graduated from law school, I was called to the bar, and I was seen as, oh, that's a rival who's going to take clients from me. So I think that's one challenge. And then the second one is that we don't have a culture of mentorship in the Caribbean. It's not a concept that's very common in our region, at least not the structured form of mentorship that exists in other places. So because this is a fairly new concept, it's difficult to engage potential mentors or potential mentees to get involved because there's nothing for them to refer to. There's nothing for them to look at and say, oh, wow, this is the value I'm getting from it. So I think those two things are making it very difficult for us to push mentorship where it should be.
Thank you for that response, Ms. Price. And, thinking really about mentorship and whether it's formal mentorship or informal mentorship is definitely an important consideration. And that's why this conversation too is so important today, to be able to understand and appreciate those formal ways that mentorship is available in the Caribbean and available to you as students. One of the things that even Mr. Hercules had shared very earlier was about how he wished he had some of the answers earlier in the process and how some of the answers came kind of by chance. So we just really want to encourage students to really think about, a formal mentorship relationship, even though, yes, many relationships can form quite organically and quite naturally. There is a value to answering some of those questions and getting that assistance to answer those kind of career or academic questions that you may have. So thank you. Dr. D'Souza, there's a question in the chat which asks, if I'm interested in becoming an economist, should I consider transitioning from undergrad to a master's? So what would you have to say about that, Dr. D'Souza?
You kind of just broke up, sorry. The last thing I heard was if you're interested in becoming an economist. That's the last thing I heard. I'm looking for the question, but I'm not seeing it.
Right, it's in the chat. Let me get it for you again. So if you're interested in becoming an economist, should you transition from undergrad to an MSc?
Well, typically that's what you would do, but it depends on the field of economics that you want to go into. For example, there are different fields. You might want to go into development, economics, political history, and economic history, and so on. So it depends. It depends on what you want to do. But typically, the path really, you would move from undergraduate and then you move on to a postgraduate degree, because you would find out in terms of employment, whenever you're speaking about somebody like an economist or an economic analyst, you would find invariably that the employers are looking for somebody with a graduate degree in economics or a related field. So yeah, that's typically the route that you would go if you're looking to become employed formally as an economist.
Thank you, Dr. D'Souza. So we see that as you transition to masters and so on, there are a variety of areas that someone interested in becoming an economist may opt to consider. So definitely that individual mentoring can be useful in answering a question like that one. So thank you, Dr. D'Souza. Again, another question from Warren. I'm a new graduate from Guyana from pharmacy. I moved to America and I aim to pursue a career in biomedical sciences. As a mentee, can I gain counsel on becoming familiar with biomedical literature?
I guess I can answer that one. Well, biomedical literature is very vast. Like, it depends on like the specific field that you're interested in. Yeah, that's my answer to that question. But you asked another question about the deficiencies of sciences in the Caribbean, especially in research. And my answer to that would be, honestly, funding is not great right now. In the Caribbean for research in sciences specifically as well. Like it's a vast difference, like what you can do experiment wise in a lab that has money compared to a lab that doesn't, right? So that's really the biggest deficiency right now, I would say. And it's a lack of capacity and resources. But there are so many skilled scientists in the Caribbean. So it's very frustrating when you're there and you want to do all of these things, but you can't because of a lack of resources. So, that's one thing I would really like to contribute somehow. I don't know what it's going to look like, but in a few years when I am older and wiser and have more money, to establish something in the Caribbean that can help push research forward in the sciences, because it's lacking. I know of a lot of scientists in the Caribbean that are not working in their field. And one, it could be a lack of knowledge about what you can do, because when I was in undergrad, I didn't know that I could work at a paint company with my science degree. I had an internship only because of my chemistry research project. They linked me to this paint company in Barbados. But I didn't know that was possible. I thought I had to work in some kind of hospital lab or a lab on campus or something, right? So it's also one, lack of resources, but also I feel as though it's not widely talked about, like all the different sectors that you can work in with a degree in science.
Thank you for that contribution, Mr. Hercules. You know, it's about understanding what your options are. So mentorship can help you in terms of career planning and your career trajectory, and it can also help you to answer some of those academic questions. What do I do next? How do I plan? Whether it's courses as part of my degree or advanced studies, like the question that Dr. D'Souza answered earlier. So we do have some challenges also, as you answered, in terms of resources, but how do you match what is being done with also kind of being aware of what are the options available to you? So, and how do you strike that balance, whether regionally or internationally? So thank you for that contribution. There was also a question about, can I be a mentor and a mentee at the same time? You know, would someone be, what perspective would you want to answer in terms of, or offer, as it relates to serving as a mentor and serving as a mentee simultaneously?
Yes, I answered that question by typing my answer, but I think it might be beneficial to everyone who did not read the answer, that yes, you can. We actually had somebody who had completed her master's, and she found herself working in a male-dominated field, and she really wanted a perspective from a female working in a male-dominated field as to how she could navigate in that area. And so we connected her with her mentor, and then months later, she actually signed on to become a mentor to help persons who wanted to come into her field. So yes, depending on what your different expertise is and your different levels of qualification, as well as what you want from mentorship and what you can offer as a mentor, it is possible to simultaneously serve as a mentee and a mentor. And some of you who, and I guess all of you who were part of the panel, all of our mentors here today, have found times in your life where you have simultaneously served as a mentor to someone while being a mentee, you know? So yes, it is possible.
So yes, our roles can change along the journey. And I think mentorship is a very important relationship if you're able to develop it with the right persons as you continue and you evolve and as you develop, because there are different questions we want to be able to answer at different parts along our journey. Now, another question on science, having a background in science, how do you go about transitioning into different fields outside of science where there's no experience? So Dr. Morion, if I could ask your perspective on this, because they gave an example of HR, and I think your early introduction may offer some good guidance and perspective on transitioning to business from a background in science. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks a lot. And it's not doctor, it's just plain old mister, but that's okay.
Sorry.
That's fine, it's fine. Okay, so I did this science, and like one of the other panelists, I was heading on this journey to become a doctor. But I planned my life many decades in advance. So I had already decided I want to have no children. All my children must be 18 by the time I'm 55. So I'm not going to PTA meetings or anything like that. So I already planned my life. I said, to become a doctor, it takes so many years to study, so many years to set up a practice. So I set up the cutoff year by when I will no longer pursue medicine. And then when the cutoff point came, I said to myself, what have you been doing that has given you most joy? And what it seemed to have been is teaching, helping people learn. And I said, okay, where can I find something that will take me there? You know, and that's how it started. So then and once you put your mind on a new track, you start finding people who are saying those things. You start seeing literature, you start seeing programs, and then you gradually work your way into there. So it's basically going inside of yourself and saying, because I don't believe you should just study HR because it's a going thing. I think you should find it within yourself and you say, this will make my soul sing, you know? By the time you get to that stage, this will make my soul sing, so let me give it a shot. And mark you, if it doesn't work, then you continue moving. But that I don't know if that answers the question, but basically you look and see what has given you most joy, what have you been good at, and try to build a career out of that. So that was the transition, and finding people along the way who will pull you up into the field. Yeah.
Yeah, so that transition can require some creativity and require some work, but it is possible, and we have an example of that here today. Now we have a number of persons asking, so how do you go about choosing a mentor? Can you have more than one mentor, one who assists professionally, or one who works on the more personal types of development that you might realize might be useful for you? So what might you guys have to say about that? How do I go about choosing a mentor, and how can mentorship serve me depending on the different areas that I might want to develop in myself?
Anyone feel free to answer.
Okay, I'll jump in. I think when you're thinking about choosing a mentor, you have to be clear in your mind. What are your goals and objectives? What are the things you want to get out of the relationship that you're going to start? Because it is, in fact, a relationship, and it could be one of the most important relationships that you nurture in your life. So you need to be clear on what your objectives are, because if you don't know, or you don't have an inkling of what you want to achieve, then you're going to end up not getting the most out of that relationship with your mentor. I think it's important also to bear in mind that when you're choosing a mentor, you need to determine whether you even have the time to put into this mentorship relationship. Because if you're not, like any other relationship, like a romantic relationship, if you're not prepared to give it the best of yourself and give it the time that it needs to grow, then you're not going to see the fruits of it, and in your mind it's going to be determined to be a failure. How do you go about actually finding a mentor? I think it's important that you isolate people who you already have a certain level of comfort with, because if you're not comfortable with someone who you may want to be your mentor, you're not going to be able to connect with that person. And you have to be able to connect with your mentor, because your mentorship relationship needs to be an open and honest relationship. I think Delano touched on that. It needs to be a relationship where you could express your fears, your anxieties, talk open and honestly and frankly about where you see yourself going and what your issues are. The only other thing I would say when you're trying to choose a mentor is it is okay to be referred to somebody. You don't necessarily have to look within your own space. You don't need to necessarily look to your lecturers or to family members. You can be referred to a mentor. And for some people, that's actually the best way to find a mentor, because they're uncomfortable expressing these things to people who are familiar to them.
Does anyone else want to make a comment in addition to the feedback that Janisha has offered? No? Okay, well, I do, those are those questions to think about, and those comments in terms of the relationship and so on are very important. Now, I know that we're over time, and persons have asked about the recording being available, and the session is being recorded, and we will try to make that available to persons who might have joined late or and to be able to just offer some additional guidance in terms of your answers. But I just want to thank everyone for your contribution. And I'm just going to field one more question. There was a query on biology and transitioning into sciences if you've had some difficulty with employment. And I would just offer that as one final question that we can approach, and then offer the opportunity for final comments before we wrap up today. Thank you.
I guess I'm the one to answer that. Yeah, I really don't know what the scope is right now in Barbados for employment within biology, but what I would say helps is finding professors within the Faculty of Science that may have connections to people in industry. So like how I said, my chemistry research project was at this random paint company in Barbados that I didn't know a chemist could be doing that. Only got that through speaking with one of my professors, right, for my research project. So these professors usually have some type of connection with some of these companies in Barbados. So I would say speaking with them. I believe UE, I think in my time they did, but they probably still do have some type of career mentorship type of, not mentorship, but some kind of office that helps you with careers. I think Dawn Marie would have more information about that. But you're interested in pursuing a master's degree in medical microbiology, I would say for sure, if you want to not look within the scope of Barbados, you can start looking at universities abroad that will give you a scholarship. Do not do any grad school that's not going to, like, don't do grad school unless you're going to get funded for it, because it will be a lot harder for you as an international student. So that would be my advice about finding the medical microbiology program. But in terms of job, I don't know. I don't really know the scope that well in Barbados at the moment.
Thank you. And yes, as you highlighted, Mr. Hercules, we do have the Office of Student Services here. I put the contact details there so that students can learn more about job opportunities, learn more about internship, mentorship, and how they can access mentorship, as well as you have your information there in terms of connecting with and learning more about CariScholar and how to apply and so on. So we are at 2:18 now. Any final thoughts from, oh, actually, sorry, there's one question about mentorship for younger persons who are not quite at university as yet. So even as you close, what might you say to a young professional who's not got into university yet? I know Dr. D'Souza talked about his trajectory coming from primary school and so on, and others did as well. As we bring this session to a wrap today, what might be some those final words of advice and direction? Thank you.
Well, yeah. I would just respond to that by saying, and I think Gerald hit the head and hit the nail on the head earlier when she spoke about grades not necessarily being the be and all. It's important that you recognize that you can come from anywhere, you can develop, and there's always a way to move forward regardless of your grades. And she mentioned a big example I have as a personal friend of mine who had some difficulties, who struggled through their university degree, and then when they got to law school, they excel simply because in law school, as Jamisha would tell you, it's more practical. It's not so much, about some of the theoretical aspects of law and so on. It's more, advocacy and in the class, the mock trials and so on. And that person was able to move forward. They never had the strongest of grades, but now they're one of the leading persons in terms of advocacy, because it's a whole different ballgame when you're not just talking about book sense, and you're not just talking about, when application comes into the mix, it's a whole different ballgame. So I would encourage anybody not to be discouraged, to continue to push, to look for mentorship. I mean, yes, we're speaking about a formal mentorship relationship, but sometimes informal mentorship can also be important. But don't discount the importance of a formal mentorship relationship. So those are things I would say. Keep pushing. You know, your journey is your journey, and you have to trust your own journey and keep pushing forward. And no matter the age, everybody has questions. Everybody here on this panel, we have doubts about our ability to get things done. But at the end, like Mr. Moran said, sometimes you just have to go and do it. And I'm sure that everybody has the ability to keep pushing forward and to keep excelling. So don't be discouraged, keep pushing. And mentorship is a big way that you can help get over some of the humps if you're having. So I encourage you to find a mentor and to work with that individual or individuals, and you would see a light at the end of the tunnel.
I would also just like to concur. Yeah, I think in those teenage years, coming out to school, going into university is always quite challenging. You know, some people know exactly what they want to do and are able to go and pursue that, but because you're not quite certain of where you want to go or how you're doing, doesn't mean that you can't find your passion or find what's meant for you. And I'll just end by saying to always try to smile in the face of adversity. That's something that I use quite often in my life. You will always face challenges. There will always be something, someone trying to get in your way of what you want or what you want to pursue. But it's up to you to really just do your best, keep your head down, and stick to the people who you know have been supportive and who you know have your best interests at heart. So that's it for me.
Okay. Right, Ms. Holder, you're asking for final comments, or?
Yes, final comments, because we
Yes.
are 2:22. Thank you.
Yes. So quickly, I just want to say I was very inspired by this process. I really, you know, by the stories of the different panelists, Dr. D'Souza, Ms. Prince, Ms. Marshall, Mr. Hercules. I mean, your stories really inspired me, and I really appreciated that. The parting shot for the other listeners is, if you find that you don't have a job, if you feel that you're not in the right job, volunteer anywhere you can. Any opportunity you get, all kind of community projects, just do it. My very first break came not because of my paid employment. It came because people knew my volunteer work and they invited me to apply for a big opportunity, and I took it. And one of my dreams for the region is that one day we will offer aid to the rest of the world, because we can. Every part of the globe I go, I meet professionals from the Caribbean who are doing exceptional work. You would be amazed at the different kinds of specialties Caribbean people have all over the region. And I'm thinking we can organize that. And Jarrell, maybe this is your future project, where senior Caribbean professionals can be given a stipend and sent abroad to all parts of the world to do stuff. And that would free up space within our system so that other people can be promoted, and new graduates from the university can also join and be sent around the world with an internship program. That way the Caribbean can expand its influence and we can really make a mark on the world. Thank you very much, everybody.
So thank you. I don't know if Dr. Joseph has any final comments, or if she's fine, but I just want to thank you all. You remember, we can continue this conversation offline. Remember that you can learn more about CariScholar at www.carischolar.com, and you can learn more about developmental sessions just like this one offered through the Office of Student Services at www.cavehill.uwi.edu/student services. So if Dr. Joseph has any parting comments, she's free to, but we are all done for today. Prior to that, unless, yes.
I will just close off by thanking the mentors for contributing their time and committing to this program. I think that everything you guys said this afternoon was so brilliant, and I'm so thankful for your coming, and all of the participants who signed up for the mentorship program. Thank you for coming and sharing your questions so that we could have a very good discussion. I think a lot of people think that people who are successful have it all figured out. And a theme that came out from this afternoon is that a lot of people did not have it all figured out. And I could say personally, I did not have it all figured out. And at every stage, it was a lecturer telling me, Gerald, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And I was like, I don't know, because I'm never like a 5-year plan kind of person. But I profoundly believe that even though you don't have it all figured out, if you make the most of the opportunities that you have now, it will open doors for you. And I think that's the one piece of advice that I can leave for people is that whatever it is that you're spending your time on now, give it your best effort. Even though it's not the thing you want to do for the rest of your life, give it your best effort, because somebody will recognize your work and they will help open doors for you. So that's the last piece of advice that I will leave. And I will thank everyone once again for joining. And thank you so much to Ms. Holder. We want to say thank you to you for, first of all, seeing the value of a program such as this, and for the amazing work that you're doing and all the work that you did to coordinate and to put today together. We really appreciate it, and we wish you all the best going forward, and we hope that we can continue this collaboration and help as much students as possible. So that is it. Thanks.
Thank you everyone. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Dr. Joseph, and thank you participants. We look forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye.